Good morning, scholars, and welcome back to Learning with Mrs. Brady. We're working on a new nation, lesson 2. Today's learning goal is I can describe the Boston Tea Party with relevant details, expressing ideas and feelings clearly. Yesterday, we learned about 2 other English settlements in North America that were settled before the Pilgrims arrived in Plymouth. Roanoke Island, called the Lost Colony, was here in North Carolina and Jamestown, Virginia. As time passed, more and more English settlers arrived in North America. All up and down the east coast right here of North America, they formed more colonies where they started new lives for themselves. By 1732, there were 13 British colonies. So the 13 British colonies, originally Maine was a part of Massachusetts. So that's why it shows Massachusetts in 2 areas. New Hampshire, New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Those were the original 13 colonies. Okay. Most of the people who lived in these 13 colonies originally came from Great Britain. There were 13 separate colonies, or places along the coast of North America, where the British people settled. The people that governing and controlling the colonies, however, still lived in Great Britain. As the British colonies grew, more and more help was needed in the colonies. Before long, the Africans who were brought up to North America were no longer treated as indentured servants, but as slaves. So we have to think about what the difference was between an indentured servant and a slave. So indentured servants had to work a number of years before they were free to choose what work to do and where to live. But slaves didn't have those freedoms. They were never paid for their work. Okay. You learned about some important events that led to the creation of our country or nation, the United States of America. Listen to learn about some of the problems the colonists encountered and to find out why the colonists started thinking about making their own rules and no longer following the King of Great Britain. For a long time, almost everyone who lived in North America was proud to be a British citizen. Ruled by the King of Great Britain. But then things began to change. The King and the British government or Parliament had spent a lot of money helping to set up and protect the colonies. To help pay for these expenses, the Parliament decided to make the colonies in America pay taxes to Great Britain. Taxes are extra money people pay when they buy certain things. For example, today we may pay taxes when we buy clothes at the department store, food in a restaurant, or gasoline for the car. Depending on the state where you live, you might need to pay $1 or 2 more for your new shirt than what's listed on the price tag, or a few extra cents for your sandwich than the price that's listed on the menu. But these stores do not keep this extra money. They must give the extra money or taxes to the government. These days, we vote and elect a representative or people to represent us in government. These people make decisions about how to best spend the taxes to provide public services that benefit all people that live there. So right now, actually, in some states, we pay a lot of extra money for gas. Like in Michigan, it's like 40 cents a gallon or 45 cents a gallon so that we can have new roads built. Okay? So the government uses the taxes to help pay for the things everybody needs, like schools, public transportation, roads, water and garbage service, police and fire protection, and other public services. Many people agree that it is a good use of their money, and they don't mind paying the taxes for a good cause. But back in the time when the colonies were first established, the people who lived in the colonies were not permitted to vote and elect representatives or people to represent them in the British Parliament on the other side of the ocean. So the room in this image is one of the rooms in Great Britain where the British Parliament meets. So many people who lived in the American colonies of the 1700s felt that it was unfair that the British king to ask them to pay taxes. The colonists were asked to pay extra for stamps, sugars, and other things. In this sentence, the word stamps refers to a small piece of paper you stick to an item to show that you paid the government what you owe, such as a postage stamp that you put on a letter and send through the mail. The word stamp can also refer to the action of bringing down a foot heavily and noisily. So go ahead and stamp on the floor once. Now that's a total different kind of stamp. Because the colonists could not voice their opinion to the British government through representative, why, they wondered, should they have to pay taxes? It just didn't seem fair to them. All over the colonies, people grew more and more angry, but it was the colony of Massachusetts that temper flared the most. King George of Great Britain sent troops to try to keep the peace in Boston, but it did not help very much. The people of the colony of Massachusetts were really mad about paying taxes. Then in 1773, the British Parliament did something that the colonists could not stand. They passed a law called the Tea Act and tried to force the colonists to buy tea from one British company only, charging a large tax for the tea. The colonists did not think it was fair to force them to pay more for tea, and they refused to pay the tax on the tea, and one of their favorite drinks. So they really liked this tea, but they were not going to pay that extra money for it. They began sending shiploads of tea back to Britain and ordering tea from Holland instead. This made the king even angrier, and he told them that they could not send any more tea back to Britain without paying the tax. Because of this, the colonists of Massachusetts revolted or rose up against the British king. They decided they would not accept the king's decision. Why do you think the colonists ordered tea from Holland? Yeah, because they don't want to pay the extra money, so they were going to get it from Holland. Shiploads of British tea continued to enter the port of Boston, Massachusetts. A port is a place on the coast where ships load and unload supplies. On a December night in 1773, a group of men known as the Sons of Liberty planned the most unusual tea party. So if we were going to have a tea party, what would we do? We would, listen to see if this is the kind of tea party the Sons of Liberty had. Smearing their faces with soot, grease, and streaks of red paint, they stuck feathers in their hair, disguised as Mohawk Native Americans, a common symbol of freedom at the time. They made their way down to the harbor, or the water along the coast. Climbing aboard 3 British ships, they dumped 342 chests of valuable tea into the Boston harbor. This meant that the British lost the tea and money. This event became known as the Boston Tea Party. Furious, King George of Great Britain closed the port of Boston, one of the American colony's most important ports. He told them that they would not receive any more goods from Britain until they paid for the tea that they had destroyed. Goods are things that can be traded, bought, or sold. With no supplies coming from Great Britain, there was nothing for the colonists to sell in their shops, so people had to close their shops. This is a shop in Boston that was owned by a man named Paul Revere. You're going to hear about Paul Revere in the next read aloud. Okay. Many people lost their jobs. Food was scarce. Colonists from up and down the East Coast helped out, sending money and supplies to Massachusetts. What were the colonists to do? What should they say to the British king? The people of the Boston began to talk of war against Great Britain and its king. But other colonists warned them not to act so quickly. Wait a bit, they suggested. It's never a good idea to fight back without a cooling off a bit first. All 13 colonies decided to come up with a plan together. They held a big meeting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, about midway between the furthest New England colonies and the furthest southern colonies. So right here is our map of the different colonies. So what we call Maine now used to be part of Massachusetts. So from the northernmost colony, Massachusetts, through New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. So all of these colonists wanted to get together. So they did it right here in Pennsylvania because it was approximately midway. Okay. So those people coming from the far north and those people coming from the far south all had to come together here. Okay. Each colony elected a representative to attend the meeting. It wasn't possible for all the colonists to attend the meeting, so each colony sent a few people to speak for their colony. It was the first time that representatives from all the colonies, except Georgia, met together in one place. They called themselves the Continental Congress. Leaders in the colonies were divided. Some remained loyal or faithful to Great Britain and the king. They were called the Loyalists. After all, they said, we're British too. Others were beginning to think of themselves not as British citizens, but as Americans. They wanted to rule themselves instead of being ruled by a faraway king. These people were called patriots. The members of the Continental Congress included George Washington, right here, George Washington, from Virginia, a young army commander who had helped protect the colonies. Benjamin Franklin, right here, was there too, a Philadelphian known for his ability to get people to work together. Though unable to attend, Thomas Jefferson, right here, known as an excellent writer, was elected as a representative for Virginia. So right here, so George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson. At that first Continental Congress, the representatives decided to approach the king in a friendly way. They sent him a letter telling him they wanted to work things out peacefully. They asked the British Parliament to stop making laws or rules for them. We feel that we should create our own laws since we are not able to vote for laws in Parliament, they said. In the meantime, while they waited for an answer from the king, the colonists decided to stop selling goods to Great Britain and stop buying goods from Great Britain. This is the Carpenter's Hall located in the First Continental Congress. They met in this building. I guess it's this one. This is really strange. I'm guessing this one? I don't know. Well, take that out. At the end of this meeting, the colonists were split in their options of what to do. This is the Carpenter's Hall location of the First Continental Congress. So this is where the representatives met. They met actually in this building in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So the Loyalists, let's see, at the end of the meeting, the colonists were still split in their opinions about what to do. The Loyalists hoped that the king would grant their request, letting them make their own laws while still remaining British. The Patriots kept things stirred up, talking of going to war to breaking away from Britain altogether. It certainly was not a calm time. So the Loyalists and the Patriots did not agree about what to do. The Loyalists were loyal to whom? Yeah, Great Britain, the King of Great Britain, right? The Patriots wanted to make their own laws. Did they want to obey the king anymore? No. So, what are taxes and what do we use them for? This is a picture of it. I'll bet you said they're extra monies that you pay for goods you buy, and the government uses it to help pay for public services such as schools, police and fire protection, roads, those kind of things. So what is a representative? A representative is someone elected to represent a larger group of people in the government. It helps the government decide what to spend the taxes on. So why did the king and British Parliament decide to tax Britain colonies in America? They wanted to get some money for sure. Okay. The British Parliament had spent a lot of money to help set up and protect these colonies, so it cost them a lot of money to run the colonies. So how did the British colonists feel about being taxed? Yes, they disagreed about it, and some people were angry. Why do you think they felt that way? Right, they didn't have any representation in the British Parliament, so they actually couldn't have anybody there to help make laws. So, what was the Boston Tea Party? Was this the kind of tea party that you have? No, this is where they dumped all the tea in the Boston Harbor. Did the Boston Tea Party solve the problem of tea being taxed? No. How do you know the problem wasn't solved? Right. The king was furious and closed the port so no more supplies could come into Massachusetts. The colonists didn't have anything to sell in their store, which led to more problems. So what was the colonists' next plan for solving the problem with the British king? Yes, they all met together in this building here. Let's see if I can find it. Right there. And they had a meeting, and they had a meeting called the First Continental Congress and wrote the king a letter. Okay. Did everyone agree on what should be done? No. Some of these colonists are loyalists. They wanted to remain loyal to the king, while others were patriots and they wanted to rule themselves. So there was no agreement. In the read aloud, you heard climbing aboard the British ships, they dumped 342 chests of valuable tea into the Boston Harbor. Say the word harbor. A harbor is a protected body of water that is deep enough for ships to set anchor. A harbor has a port facilities where ships load and unload goods. So the workers unloaded the crates of fruit from the ship in the harbor. So right here, I'm going to show you pictures of various harbors. These are all various harbors. See the big ship right here? Okay. They can, let's let's see if I can find an image of a commercial harbors. Here we go. They have the big cranes, and there's really big ships in there. And this is where they bring in large quantities of goods still today on ships, and how we can buy and sell right here goods with, you know, China and other countries. Still today we use these harbors. Okay, so you're going to draw a picture of a harbor. That's something I want you to do. You're going to label it. You're going to draw a picture of a harbor, and you're going to take a copy of that, a picture of your picture, and load it onto Class Dojo for me. Okay? So we're going to take a look at this one right here. We're on page 24. Going to look down here. There we go. These are various types of stamps. This one goes on the envelope. This one is like you could just stamp a piece of paper, and here he is stamping on something on the ground. So in this read aloud, you heard the colonists were asked to pay extra for stamps, sugar, and other things. Here, stamps mean small pieces of paper right here that you buy to put on an envelope or a package to pay for the cost of mailing it. So that's this kind of stamp. Okay. Stamps also have other meaning. The word stamp can mean an object used to mark something else with a design. So right here, and we had some stamps in our classroom which had like ghosts and stuff, and I would stamp your hands with those. So during Halloween season, we used this kind of stamp. Stamp also has another meaning. The word stamp can mean to bring your foot down heavily with a lot of noise. So right here, he's stamping on the ground. He's actually stamping a piece of trash here, but you don't always have to have a piece of trash. You can just stamp your foot. Some people who are having a fit will stamp their feet. Okay? Alright, so right here, we have our digital timeline right here where we showed the Native Americans were here, and then Christopher Columbus, and then we had the Pilgrims. So I'm wondering, I think there's a new one here, which is going to be the Boston Tea Party right here. And I'm going to cut and put that into these images. But I'm wondering if this is a timeline of events. This event happened first, and then, oops, let's see. This happened next, and this happened next. So these were the Pilgrims getting off the ship. And then when do you think the Boston Tea Party happened? It will be after this. So I'll make that change before we meet again next time so you can take a look at our new timeline. Today's learning goal was I can describe the Boston Tea Party with relevant details, expressing ideas and feelings clearly. Thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.